In celebration of National Accessibility Week, I would love to introduce our audience for you. I'm Sydney from IncluCity Calgary organization in Calgary, so I might ask both of you to introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Uriel. I am the project coordinator at IncluCity Calgary. I, came to IncluCity being very interested in inclusive design and digital equity and all the other amazing values that IncluCity holds and wanting to see that come to life. So prior to IncluCity, I have a background in neuroscience and in community kind of development and all sorts of things. So we can, get more into the whole inclusivity side of it. And thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on this panel discussion. So excited to know more about inclusive design.
Yeah.
How about you, Sydney?
Yeah, I'm Sydney Harder. I'm the communications coordinator with IncluCity, and I've been with this organization for just over 2 years now. I was introduced to this idea of a project before it was even a thing through the Mount Royal University community. So we explored the digital divide and inclusion and accessibility in terms of our growing technology sector, and it's just been such a fun project to be part of, and every day is a little bit different here, so quite excited to be able to talk to community members like you, and excited to be here.
Well, thank you, Sydney. And you also maybe to start with, maybe you can describe what is inclusive design in terms of technology.
Yeah. So I think inclusive design is an approach that seeks to include as many people as possible when you're designing or creating a product. So it might not be, one design or one product to rule them all, but maybe slight adjustments and thinking about how different users use your product or service or process. Just really trying to make sure that it is accessible and inclusive to different users.
And what about you, Sydney? Do you have a different perspective when you think about inclusive design?
Yeah, I mean, in a very small nutshell, it's just putting humans at the center of the things you're creating, and asking them questions about it, and having an empathy lens in terms of what you're creating and why you're creating it, and actually solving problems that people have. So.
Maybe I could, in the past, I've heard the 20%, 80% rule. So when you design for the 20%, it works for everybody. So that's why I think one of the appealing aspects when you put humans at the center of what you're designing. So perhaps either of you can explain what does inclusivity does for what do you guys do in the space?
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point about building from the margins, right? Like if we were to build for people with different needs and have that be a part of the process, then we can build better for everyone. So IncluCity is trying to make that accessible for any business, organization, technology teams that are wanting to do that are wanting to include all these great values that we speak of that are usually in a part of a lot of the corporate strategies is inclusion and diversity and equity and accessibility. But what does that look like when we're designing technology? It means taking the time to hear from the people that actually will be using your product. So we're not building for the people in the room making the technology. We're building for the people out there using it. And inclusive design, I think, also necessitates this idea that nobody is the expert. No one person knows all the answers. So we go out and we seek direct input from end users. So IncluCity, speaking to the product owners, we provide tailored services in inclusive UX research, which can include inclusive user testing, accessibility and usability assessments, recruiting those, the proper representation of diverse testers or end users, and a bunch of other things. So, that's what we do for kind of the people out there building technology. And on the other end, we have a huge pool of testers in our community that we are trying to include in the design. So kind of bridging that gap between those that make and those that use products and services, and focusing on the groups that have been historically kind of underrepresented in user testing. So how can we include more people with disabilities, more people over the age of 65 and older adults, more newcomers, like all these different groups. So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, you touched on all of our services, which is awesome. One thing I'll add is we're the first of this kind of testing, this inclusive usability testing spin on traditional usability testing or user testing. So we've been inspired by a couple of other projects. Some of them are in Canada, some of them are outside of Canada. And so we've really been inspired by other projects that are including people from all across a city in the development of technology solutions. And so we're just really excited to be launching this here in Calgary, and the interest that we've picked up as we've really started getting going.
Yeah, but this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you guys, because it was amazing how ideas like IncluCity happen right here in Calgary, which is typically all used to be known as oil and gas, but it's kind of awesome to highlight different projects, different initiatives. I think what you guys are doing here is amazing. So it kind of touched on usability testing, but how does it differ from field to field? Do you think, how do you incorporate that perspective when dealing with different type of industries?
Yeah, so you're right. There's so many different kind of variables that we're working with here. We're working with different fields. We're within each field, one particular product that we're testing might have a different objective or goal than another product or service that we're testing. So it really depends from like client to client, even within a field, what approach we want to take. So UX research has, a whole arsenal of these different methods that we could use depending on what we want to find out for each test. So, we if I were to explain what usability testing is or user testing as a whole, it's kind of a part of a larger category of what people know as like software testing. So where we test products, but even within that, there's like the non-functional software. So non-functional software testing. I'm getting really nerdy here, but the distinction is that functional testing tests kind of, does your app work? Does the code have any bugs? That type of thing. And we're not necessarily doing that. What we're doing is focusing on the user's experience, right? The user interface. So not within non-functional, then we can get into the distinctions of like accessibility testing and usability testing, and we want to figure out, why, where are people struggling, right? Where are the challenges and hurdles that people are facing when they're using your product? So, we facilitate those that research question in a very moderated form. We use facilitated, guided, or moderated usability tests. They all mean the same thing, where if Sydney was a tester, I would be the facilitator in the room with her, and I would ask her to kind of follow a set of tasks or prompts, and if you could do it successfully, that's great. If not, we would ask you questions about the quality of your experience as you do it, and where you struggle and that kind of thing. And you can't really get that in like a survey, but surveys are really great and important too, and there's all these different methods. So to kind of put it all together and to find a kind of research a set of methods that work best to figure out what the question the client is looking for. So these are all great things that our UX research teams, that are volunteer led, can answer and kind of parse through.
No, well, thank you for providing that level deeper. Maybe a follow-up question for you from me. Is there an ideal number of people when you're doing the facilitator testing? Is there a right number of people that should participate in the testing?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what kind of data you're looking to get. One thing we've noticed is between like 8 to 20 test participants. And you're able to get so much rich, authentic data from that, that after that it's actually diminishing return. So we've noticed that those moderated tests usually, that kind of smaller amount of people is enough. And then if we want to go into more surveys, then we can kind of expand that out and do a lot more with that. But that's what we've noticed. I don't know if you have more experience.
Yeah, no,
in
totally.
that area.
Yeah, that's a good number. And we can also look at the scope of the test. So 8 to 20 is a good number of tests, but we are, would be focusing on maybe one area of focus or one, process, let's say a registration process. And so try to figure out what's a good balance of like data for to gather from testers without overwhelming the testers and all that types of stuff. So the 8 to 20 rule is great.
Yeah, I think I'm happy that you both mentioned diminishing return because I think it's really important that you want to do analysis per hour where you keep on doing analysis and yet you can't identify things that are important. So I have one follow-up question. For you mentioned how you brought this group to ask them to do tasks. Do you ever do ask them to just test out the app without any problems? Like, is that an important part of usability testing? If allowing users to test without any explanation on how to use the app or technology?
So I guess there are different ways of testing, and we also realize that there are also different kind of barriers preventing from people accessing testing. There's a lot of misunderstandings as to what software testing is. Like, you need to know a lot about technology going in, for example, and you don't. Everybody should come as they are to be software testers or to be user testers. And that diversity in kind of digital literacy will make things better. So that's kind of one kind of myth I'd like to dispel. And we love to specialize in that richness of facilitated tests, because it enables us to hear directly from the user and ask follow-up questions to them while they're in either video call or in person with us. So there's much more information to be had there in those conversations when we could see people struggling, and you can ask follow-up questions, and you can get into the whole the science behind how to ask good questions, which is a part of good UX research, and how to be unbiased when asking those questions, and how to conduct UX research in a respectful way, and all those things. But just to kind of more so answer your question is that we can do unmoderated tests, and that will give you different type of information. The type of information that is more quantitative, maybe than the qualitative stuff that we're kind of reaching for. And speaking directly to users and testers can foster different type of interaction where we get to understand maybe the challenges not only in them using the technology, but also in our process, because we're trying to improve, we're trying to get better, we're trying to understand what are the challenges preventing people from coming in. So if digital literacy is one thing where somebody is struggling to use Google Meet or Gmail to get into those user tests, right, which is something that is required in a sense in our kind of tester registration process, where we can identify that, or we have the awareness to know that people have different struggles, and that might be one of those challenges. So I will make my number available to them if they want to just call in to make sure that they have a way. And so building those digital literacy kind of skills shouldn't be kind of a prerequisite, but something that they can do when they're in the tests, for example. So that's something that we've learned, is that there are challenges and barriers for people to access tech in every single process, and we are the first to say that we should test our own processes, to kind of be the champions of that inclusive design aspect.
Maybe I might ask you a follow-up question for me. Beyond digital literacy, are there any other challenging aspects for implementing inclusive design?
Yeah, Uriel touched on the barriers that a tester might face in maybe participating in a usability test. But I'm going to flip it a little bit and actually talk about the barriers that an organization might face when they're wanting to either incorporate inclusive design or even just act on their diversity, equity, and inclusion principles that we've all got them listed on our website, but how do we meaningfully interact and act on those and live those values throughout our organization? And so we've identified a lot of barriers that an organization might face when they want to do good, but they don't know how to get started. And so maybe they don't have access to underrepresented or marginalized people. They don't feel comfortable or confident engaging respectfully and doing so in a way that isn't going to do more damage than good. And then also just such limited time and resources. I mean, organizations are being asked to do more with less all the time. So that's a huge barrier we've identified when we're talking to potential clients or just the community in general is, yeah, this is all great, but like I need to have my app out next month. So how am I supposed to find time for like a truly impactful usability study for my whatever app and whatever it might be? So that's something we've identified, and so we've kind of pivoted how we tailor our services to really help organizations break down those barriers and kind of save them the headache of trying to do it all on their own, if you will. Yeah, so that's why we are trying to really improve that support system as we grow.
Yeah, it can be quite overwhelming for organization when you know by a certain point, but you don't know where to start. Maybe I have a follow-up question in terms of maybe perception of barriers. I want to kind of ask, how big is the market for inclusive design in Calgary? Every having conversation with potential clients, and how have you seen IncluCity impact the marketplace?
Yeah. Well, when we started, we were obviously very mission aligned with community organizations, nonprofits, charities, some social enterprises. Just the nature of what they were looking to do and what we were looking to do was very supportive of each other's activities. So we found that those were our first kind of friendly clients, and so that was the sector we hung out in a lot. And as we've grown and we've been able to kind of move more broadly so that we can support those social organizations. But then we can also start to work in the tech sector, and we've been building relationships throughout the Platform Calgary community and trying to really expand our impact in just for-profit tech sector. So that's been kind of fun, and then we've also recently expanded into the government sector. So we've been able to announce a collaboration with the City of Calgary. And so we're continuing to expand. We don't have probably specific numbers yet, but you know, one thing we noticed with some of the other projects that we were inspired by is that they work across sectors, and they look to kind of incorporate this idea that diverse voices should be included in the development of solutions for everything, not just for like a homeless shelter or something that's very social serving, but you know, the way that you go to the ATM at the bank and get your money out should be tested so that it works for everyone. Or order a coffee at McDonald's. I know they've got the touch screens now. And so all of these things have the potential to be so good for humans. And so we're trying to really expand that reach as much as we can.
Do you find the marketplace still being defined, or since the start of IncluCity, and finding it to be more defined? Like, how are you finding the marketplace? Are you a organization now coming to you, or are you still engaging with the community?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the importance of inclusive design is becoming more relevant, and people are engaging with us and interested in what we have to offer as a service. Yeah, we've been asking ourselves this question for a long time of, you know, when we do market research and trying to figure out where we fit. You know, Sydney brings up a good point that we straddle many different kind of fields, and you know, we don't directly compete with the like strictly UX research companies within Calgary, because we also offer this other tangible outcome of like, and value of like, you know, actioning on people's DEI or you know, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility kind of values as well. So kind of social impact and UX research, and you know, that we don't find that there's direct kind of people competing with us, but we want to work collaboratively with any service provider out there that is doing, you know, interested in also offering inclusive UX research. And Plato Testing is an example of someone in Calgary, another organization doing great things, and we also, you know, get to work with all the kind of social impact tech people, and to those to the people that are innovating and, you know, have actioned and implemented their kind of EDI process across their operations, they're the ones that we don't have to work too hard to sell. Like they're already on board, you know, like, you know, Pedesting, right? Like you fit. We you know, there's a great a match there in a sense, and just in, you know, you inviting us here for this conversation, you know, that goes to show, right? So it's I think the market, there's kind of a blurry picture for us in terms of, you know, where we fit exactly, but we know that there's just a lot of interest that we've gotten so far, and we see the need for this, and we love to, you know, show other people kind of the positive benefits that come from this great initiative. Getting everybody to think about it. So how do we? Yeah.
I think this might be the perfect time to lead to my next question, Sydney. How does the individual community contribute to achieving inclusive design? Maybe you can elaborate on what you just mentioned about your recent announcement or collaboration with the City of Calgary.
Yeah, in terms of an organization incorporating this inclusive design, as Uriel said, it's becoming very popular very quickly, and so people are talking about it. How do we do this? How do we get involved? And so, UX designers, we've got so many amazing people on our team that are diving into this and saying, no, humans should be at the center of design, always. And so there are a lot of advocates for it, particularly in Calgary, which is awesome because we've got a booming tech economy coming our way. And so, organizations can incorporate this in all sorts of ways, and I know we've got some tips for you later in the conversation, so I won't spoil anything. But the biggest thing for me is just, staying curious about who your end user is, who could be a potential end user. One example that comes to mind that one of our board members brought up is, a wheelchair ramp is great for, someone who needs a wheelchair ramp with a wheelchair, but it's also good for the mom who's got a toddler and an armful of groceries. So it solves problems for different end users than the initial intended end user. So when you're staying curious, then you come up with all these sorts of different solutions that you might not have in the first place, which can increase your impact, it could increase your profits. It's just good for business. And so, checking your biases about who you're designing for is so important. And I know that's really big picture, but even at IncluCity, we find ourselves checking our biases all the time and asking ourselves, why are we thinking like that? How can we do better?
Even for the member, checking the bias, because even at Pedesting, it's easy to have bias about physical mobility, but it's really important to say, okay, who's the end user? When you talk about accessibility, there's a broad spectrum, like I said, families with young children, senior citizen on the walker, so the use case can be easily expanded to just take a step back and think about other possibilities. So, maybe this is a good time. I think what are some of the fundamental principles organizations can look to when they want to ensure inclusive design? We talked about putting humans at the center, but how do you do that? Like, what's a good design process?
So many ideas.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So there's things that can be answered through secondary research, which is like relying on what is already published and put out there in terms of what we know that people struggle with and that might be unintentionally excluding different population groups. So we've seen on Netflix there's coded bias, right, where the first few versions of Face ID didn't work the same for people of color than it did for other people. So we're unintentionally excluding people in that process. And where they went wrong, there's plenty of places, and they since came out with better versions. And I'll let y'all watch the movie. I won't spoil it for you. Coded bias on that as an example. But not to lose my train of thought here. Yeah, there are definitely ways where one can look to what is already out there, and there's many resources like Nielsen Norman is a great tool where a great website where people can go to read on the latest UX research publications and how people can incorporate better heuristics, or basically like rules of thumbs that will help them design better. And we could also do that test for you if you need, in terms of seeing how well your product matches up to the kind of 10 principles in UX. And I won't get into all 10, but maybe one of the things that we discovered that run true is kind of keeping things, keeping the cognitive load of processes and services kind of as low as possible for people to not create any type of constraint. For example, language, right? We communicate things through language and through speech, but people are at different levels in their language and comprehension. So, I spent 8 months in Quebec and with my partner as well, and the last thing that we were able to really comprehend are jokes and idioms and metaphors and things like that. And so if you think about, all the newcomer populations in Calgary and people who speak, English as a second or nth language, which is quite impressive, how could we design better for all these people and not exclude them in accessing, in some cases, vital information, is by being clear and concise and keeping language simple. And that in itself can be the ramp, basically, for many people. By doing that, it's a fundamental rule that can open the doors for many people. So think about that, and there are many rules in terms of like accessibility. So there's the kind of WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for those of you developing and making stuff for people online, like you understand the importance of it, hopefully. If not, there are many different, kind of rules of thumbs and things to follow to make sure that websites are accessible to people using assisted devices to access those technologies. That's kind of my...
So maybe it might be a follow-up question for you from the audio, like a lot of fundamental principles differ when a product is already built and being tested versus from the onset, and when you're just thinking of an idea of what to do, I will principle the same, or I mean, it's always easier to implement things in design versus something that I've already built, but I would need different principles when something's not built versus something that's already built.
Right. Yeah. So I guess just to round off my the last question, which will bring me into this one. Secondary research is what I was saying was necessary to understand that there's principles out there that people can look up, fundamental principles to help people design more inclusively. But the thing that the principles can't tell you is exactly which words are exclusionary, exactly which sentences people don't understand. That depends very much on the end users and the demographics and people within the kind of population that we're speaking of. So for that, user testing is necessary because we can't claim to know everything just simply from doing research on our computers. Right? We got to go and actually do the thing and discover all the things that are specific to those to the people that we're testing with. And the iterative process of that is essential. Within IncluCity, we have this practice that we do, and we share usability moments, right? So we ask people to share stories of things, technology that they came across that either wasn't usable at all, wasn't user friendly, and some that really were, that they want to share with other people, like go get yourself an Apple Watch, it's great because of this or that reason. And one story that was shared is of the kind of newest versions of the kind of payment systems that don't have the braille on them. It's just a glass screen, right, where you would pay to tap or pay by inserting or what have you. But not by removing the braille, you're basically excluding people who use braille and read braille and need to in some way or another know how to access their PIN information. So people with visual impairments or that are blind use braille, and so for that, a horror story is that you have to trust the person in line behind you to tap or to maybe provide them your banking information, your code. It's scary. Wow. So when we think about innovation, we think it's making things better, and it should be making things better. But unless you innovate and test at the same time, you could lose this kind of inclusive nature of your technology. So we advocate and support people in kind of not just doing the test once and implementing and operationalizing that those learnings, but to also make sure that future versions are tested as well. So it's a continuous process of learning where you can think of new solutions in new ways, but you also need to think of basically from my earlier talk about like building from the margins, right? Yeah. And Sydney, do you have anything else to add to that?
Oh, you kind of covered it. No, that's really great.
Yeah.
I think maybe the perfect segue every month like about the payment and system. So to maybe dispel how big a marketplace, maybe you can talk about like what the cost and economic considerations for inclusive design. So what are the economic benefits of doing inclusive design? And because typically people that I talk to, some of them will say, oh, accessibility is a small market, but it's not a small market. So maybe you can touch on the economic benefit of inclusive design.
Yeah, well, I'll start it off with a pretty amazing statistic that I found on actually Nielsen Norman that you were talking about is for every dollar invested in user experience, you get $100 return. So, it feels like an overwhelming cost or time commitment to an organization that has very limited resources. But the impact of that time and money spent is amazing. It can have such a benefit to the organization. So I would argue that every organization should explore it when they're coming up with new solutions, when they're iterating on solutions that have been around for a while. Get to know your users and bring them into the room like IncluCity offers, just tester recruitment. So even if you have that user experience team already ready to go, we can bring the people into the room for you, or you can go out to communities and do research, and it just has such an amazing benefit. So a couple of things we've noticed through the tests we've done are the organizations are better able to engage with diverse users, and basically, up until now, increase their impact. So they're able to serve more people. One organization was serving women, but they weren't in touch with women who are newcomers to Calgary. And so we were able to open up the scope of who they can serve to a whole wide range of people who identify as women. And it was just such an incredible result of a test. And already a social serving organization went, whoa, we've been inclusive in these ways and we can improve and do so much better. And as we expand, we really hope to be able to explore more economic benefits of what we're doing, and be able to say, this is how you increase your profit. This is the ROI on a usability test in your website or whatever it is. And we're still pretty new, so giving you exact numbers, unfortunately, we cannot do yet. But that is a goal of ours, to be able to measure our impact more and more as we grow.
I think everything came with Pedesting, sometimes all the social impact is easy to measure, but the ROI is something not black and white, but I think you need to have lots of data to kind of say, okay, this is the actual ROI. Rather than inclusive design. So I guess my next question for you, Cindy, is cost the barrier for organizations to do usability or inclusive design? Are there any government grants or funding available that organizations can look at?
Well, depending on which sector you operate in, there are lots of options, and they kind of cycle through different seasons, as many social serving organizations will empathize with. And so we've been supported by the Calgary Foundation previously, and they do a community grant that is really impactful for organizations typically who are with a charity. So either in partnership with a charity, or else the charity could apply on your behalf. You can kind of figure that out in partnerships. So we were really excited to be chosen for that grant a couple of years ago, and that enabled us to launch this project, which was really great. So I would recommend looking into that if you are kind of a social serving organization. If you go on to actually the Government of Canada's grant seeker, you can put in your information about what sector you operate in, what your business is registered as, and then you can actually have grants tailored to you, which is pretty cool, and you can kind of search based on those results. So I'd recommend looking into that and kind of tailoring those. I know Alberta Innovates does a bunch of grants that are very focused on innovation, digital innovation, and so sometimes you can look into those depending on what you're looking to test and who you are. And so I hate to say it, but it does depend. But there are tons out there, and they do come seasonally. So spring, usually like around this time, a bunch of grants will be due. So if you kind of set aside some time to making that happen, it can have a lot of impact, and we can do some pretty cool stuff with it.
I will think that it's good to know that funding is available for organizations, and that can help. I think it can help organizations see the impact of inclusive design. So maybe I will turn it over to you earlier. Like once usability testing is done, what is typically next steps for organizations after? Maybe you can describe what next step looks like, and are these items accessible for organizations to take?
Yeah. So the next steps look different depending on kind of what the client's needs are and where they're at in their process of developing their product. But oftentimes we would kind of work with them to from the results of the tests, which was basically the test needed to be designed in a way that would enlighten the kind of question that was brought up of what are the struggles or hurdles or anything else that the client needed to find, that the client defined, so in the kind of final phase, we would return to them a report that answered the question, or sometimes didn't, or found, depending on the results, we would kind of work with that organization to help them kind of implement. And usually from there is where we kind of take a step back and let the organization kind of work on the design aspect of it, just because we have been more so focused on the research end of things, kind of shining a light to all of the hurdles and the challenges that end users face, and then the client organization would kind of through different means implement on the design. And we do have, or we have recently kind of started to delve into that path, the inclusive design aspect, where we would go in and help the organization. But it very much depends on, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by saying we're open to doing also design as well as research, but it's a case-by-case thing, because depending on how you operate your solution, if you have a third-party vendor that takes care of it, or if you have your own dev and UX team within your organization, or UX person, how do we best work with you, that type of thing, we would work together. And how to, addressing the bigger picture of how do we make it so that it's not just a test findings report on your desk that is left there forever and not touched, right? That is a kind of larger systemic question of incentivization, I think. But if you are an organization that has spent money on this service and you are dedicated to seeing a difference, you will. And what we have seen, people we've worked with, they've implemented, they've done those changes or are working on changing them. And education is another piece, right? Where how could we move it forward in a way that's not just fixing this one solution, but can fix all future solutions. So if the client were to re-engage us and be like, hey, we're making this new thing, how do we, could you check it for us again, or how do we make sure that it's made right and made, in an inclusive way once more? So, we're in the process of kind of designing workshops and can also kind of work together in a collaborative way with those organizations moving forward. So, yeah, a few different ways, but not to just simply leave the kind of report on the desk and not look at it. That's ideally not where we want to go, and I think a lot of people are really keen on learning and iterating in a way that does kind of move those inclusive design processes forward into the future. And we can kind of help different organizations depending on what they're looking for. And I also did want to add my 2 cents on the ROI.
Yeah.
Because there's more to be said there, if I can. If you
allow me to. Absolutely.
Okay, so a few interesting stats as well from Calgary Economic Development. There's over 240 something different ethnic or people from 240 different ethnic backgrounds in Calgary. Yeah, and there's so many different languages spoken. I think we're the third most diverse city in Calgary, and we are the we're the first choice for second movers, I believe.
Yeah.
So people that immigrate to Canada, they might find themselves in Toronto or Ottawa or elsewhere, and then they come to Calgary as a secondary location, like they must have heard about the mountains or something. So there is a need for this type of testing in Calgary, and as the economic and the kind of tech boom continues to rise, how can we make sure that things are accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities? That's like 1 in 5 people in Canada and globally as well, right? Like that's huge.
Yeah.
So that's 20% of your market, like that you're excluding if you don't think about accessibility.
I often tell people in my conversation, if one of the largest minority groups in the world,
The biggest minority in the world.
yeah,
Exactly.
over 1.24 billion people, and so it always shocks me why the marketplace thinks it's a small market, but when you think about those stats, I think it's a huge marketplace.
Yeah.
So I think at this point earlier, like the education and awareness component is critical to help create that. But to help facilitate that lens into the marketplace. I was going to ask you, before you spoke on why you were speaking about having a report set on self, I wanted to ask you, do you find organizations have expertise or even if we're using a third party to implement the recommendations? And what if they don't have expertise? What we recommend to those organizations that want to implement recommendations have IncluCity work with the organization?
I think there's a difference between if an organization wants to implement it but doesn't have the resources versus if they lack the kind of motivation or incentive to implement these changes and do or do not have the resources. I feel like the people usually want to implement it, and that's from experience of who we've been working with. People definitely do want to see the change happen through their organization, but they kind of lack the tools and resources to do so. And that's a great question. Just off the top of my head, I can think of within what we can offer at IncluCity is just like being a part of that guided process and seeing where we can help. And by kind of shining a light, let's say we realize that the third-party vendor that they're going through to make this website or registration process isn't serving them or isn't working for them, then it's up to the organization to kind of revisit their relationship with that third-party vendor, or we've had it be the case where one organization we worked with, they were in this exact same predicament, and they reached out to that vendor, and they wrote them an email with all the resources that we provided to say that, like, here's where your software tool could be improved and made better, and we want to see this change in subscript or else. And so they took it upon themselves to reach out, and there is an incentive then for that vendor to think about inclusion and accessibility, which is really cool to see. So we're seeing that change happen throughout. So there's some simple things that you could do like that, which is if you don't feel like you have the resources or tools, then there's ourselves, IncluCity, or a community of people within the social impact space or the EDI space that might have the answers. So to reach out to these community members or people that might know to help empower that change or that implementation. So that's one very niche example. And then kind of I was talking about the large kind of systemic incentives to thinking about inclusive and accessible design. I think the more people get behind it, the more that we talk about it, the more information is out there and made accessible to people to think about inclusion and accessible design. I think the easier it will be to get behind this concept, and the easier it'll be for people to implement, where if it's made easier, right, then it's hard not to take it off the desk. So being again empathetic to the plights of the founders who are working with a whole lot of other stuff that they have to deal with, and little resources, like Sydney was saying earlier. How could we lessen that load for them? And I think we're kind of slowly kind of starting to get there. But
Well, this might be the perfect time to think with my last question. I know you've been waiting the whole conversation, Finney, but what a brief way that organizations can do to begin the inclusive design journey, or a way to implement best practices for usability and inclusive design?
Yeah, I mean, we might have revealed some of our secrets already, but the first one is doing your research. And so those Nielsen Norman resources, just their whole website, and they are all about user experience, so everything is just really beautiful and fun to engage with anyways. And so going through those resources, just learning about it, being open to learning more about it. And I know that there isn't a lot of time, but You can even do quick searches and kind of find what you're looking for just on Google. So that's a really great resource. It's free for the most part to just do research online. And then my top tip is just to be open to engaging with communities. So what we do at IncluCity is just build relationships every day. We're always trying to learn more about diverse populations. How are we able to increase diversity in our own tester pool, and how are we able to better serve our volunteers who come from all sorts of different backgrounds. And so being open to the learning process and the curiosity process. Those are my top two, Uriel. I know you had some ideas as well, so I'm going to pass it to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for those interested in nerding out about UX, Nielsen Norman is the best, I will say. There's different kind of ways you can approach it depending on kind of what resources that you have available within your organization. If you have the means to hire someone, to hire a UX person, there are plenty of amazing UX researchers and designers within the city. And shout out to Calgary UX is like one of the best meetup groups for interested members to learn more about UX, and they have plenty of other really great things to support kind of UX development. And if hiring isn't a solution, or actually if you can hire one UX person, you might as well hire a team, because a team is better than one person. So that's me advocating for UX researchers out there. And it's hard to conduct and facilitate research by oneself, in that there's kind of there's biases that you have to be aware of when you creating scripts and asking questions, or else you might come up with things that you think are correct but might not be. And so just my caution to people is when doing these, if you wanted to do your own kind of user tests, to be careful of those, and to seek out advice or resources from people, from UX researchers, I think any attempt is great. And like Sydney said, reach out to those communities. Have like one person from outside of your network if possible, maybe two, maybe three. Build up those numbers, type of thing. And if you are tired of doing it yourself, you could always hire us, of course. I'd say going back to kind of the things that we talked about earlier, keep things as simple as can be, kind of simple, concise, and clear. As one example of a golden rule, if you're looking for one that is actionable, and if you're on a developer team, take the time to do research. There might seem like there's pressures from above that you need to build fast and lean, but to have time for testing in there can, like Sydney was saying, improve your ROI, and we'll make sure that there's no kind of downstream hurdles, burdens, etc. that you're imposing on your end users, or all in all bugs and things that you could have kind of tested earlier on. So anyways, those are all of my suggestions, and of course McKag, as I talked about before.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. You have to be careful of unintended consequences of development decisions that the team is making. So I think it's a great way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much, Sydney and Uriel, for taking your time to prepare for what IncluCity does in some ways that organizations and community members can get engaged. So thank you so much, and I hope we'll continue collaborating with IncluCity, and hopefully together we can make the world more accessible and inclusive.
Yes,
Thank you.
It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for having us.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a fun conversation. Happy accessibility.
Thank you. Bye.